My house was destroyed by a devastating fire. At 65, I went to seek refuge at my son's place, but he turned me away, claiming his fiancée needed privacy. Desperate, I called my first love, a man I hadn't seen in 4 decades. When he opened the door to his mansion, he spoke just 3 words. "You finally came home." My life was changed forever. But before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. We love to know how far our stories travel. My name is Grace, and at 65 years old, I thought I had already experienced every kind of suffering life could throw at me. I was wrong. It all started on a Wednesday that seemed just like any other in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was in the kitchen fixing my afternoon coffee when I smelled something strange. I decided to check, thinking maybe I'd left something on the stove. When I opened the living room door, I was met by a wall of smoke so thick I could barely see through it. Flames were already consuming the curtains and racing up the walls with a speed that left me paralyzed for a few crucial seconds. The smoke detector should have been screaming, but I found out later the battery had died months ago. A simple oversight that would cost me everything I owned. I ran back to the kitchen, fumbling for the phone to call the fire department. But the smoke was everywhere, making it hard to breathe, impossible to think straight. I heard glass breaking and realized I had no time. The flames were eating my house with a ferocious hunger that seemed impossible to contain. My only thought was to get out alive. I grabbed my purse, which was on the kitchen table, and bolted for the back door. The last thing I saw before I burst outside was the portrait of Robert, my late husband, starting to blacken from the heat. The neighbors were already in the street when I stumbled out, coughing and gasping. Mrs. Jenkins, my 78-year-old neighbor, was the first to rush over, hug. When I saw Thomas's name light up my screen, it felt like time had folded back on itself. My trembling hands opened the message that simply said, "Is this still Grace?" I stared at those 4 words for a long time before replying, "It's still me." Within minutes, my phone buzzed again. He wanted to see me. I hadn't seen him in 50 years, yet something deep inside me whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something I didn't even know I needed. We met the next afternoon at a small diner by the bus station. The moment I walked in, I recognized him, older, yes, but the same kind eyes, the same smile that once made me believe in forever. "Grace," he said softly, and for the first time in months, my name didn't sound like a burden. We talked for hours about life, loss, and the strange way time steals everything except memories. He told me he'd lost his wife a few years ago, that he now lived on a quiet farm in Vermont. I told him everything, how Jason had told me to leave, how lost I felt, how tired I was of pretending to be strong. Thomas listened without interrupting, his eyes full of something I hadn't seen in years, compassion. When I finally stopped talking, he reached across the table, took my hand, and said 3 words that broke whatever was left of my walls: "Come home." Grace, I didn't answer right away. I just stared at him, tears sliding down my cheeks, because in that moment I realized those words weren't an invitation to his house, they were an invitation back to myself. A week later, I packed what little I owned and took the long bus ride to Vermont. The farm was surrounded by golden fields and pine trees that swayed in the cold breeze. Thomas showed me the small cabin beside his house, already prepared for me: warm blankets, a vase of wildflowers, a note that said, "New beginnings live here." The days turned into weeks, and I began to heal. We'd sit on the porch every evening, watching the sunset paint the sky with colors I'd forgotten existed. Winter in Vermont was breathtaking. White fields stretching endlessly beneath a silver sky, and the kind of silence that makes your heart feel at peace. 3 months had passed since I'd sent my last message to Jason, and though he hadn't replied, I'd finally found a quiet strength inside myself. But life, as it often does, had one more surprise waiting. That Sunday morning, as Thomas made coffee and the scent of cinnamon filled the cabin, a knock echoed through the door, soft, hesitant, uncertain. When I opened it, I froze. There he was, my son, standing in the cold, eyes red and voice trembling as he whispered, "Mom, can I come in?" My heart stopped, but I stepped aside. He looked around the small cabin, the framed photo of me and Thomas on the mantel, the plants by the window, and whispered, "You look happy." "I am," I said simply. What followed were words I had longed to hear for years. He confessed everything: the guilt, the regret, the loneliness. His wife had left him. The children missed me. The house felt empty without my laughter. I don't deserve your forgiveness, he said, tears running down his cheeks. But I miss you, Mom. I took a deep breath and placed my hand on his shoulder. Forgiveness isn't something you earn, Jason, I said softly. It's something I give because I refuse to live in bitterness. Then he showed me his phone, a viral article with my photo and Thomas's, titled 74-year-old woman starts over after being kicked out by her son. Millions had read it. Thousands had left comments calling me an inspiration. Thomas posted your story, Jason explained. He wanted people to see that kindness still exists. My heart swelled with emotion. I turned to Thomas, who smiled quietly and said, I couldn't keep your light hidden, Grace. Jason looked at me, eyes full of remorse. Can I visit again? Can the kids see you? And in that moment I smiled, not out of weakness but out of strength. Yes, I said. But come because you want to. You feel you have to. He nodded, and for the first time in years my son hugged me, truly hugged me. Later that evening, as the grandkids played in the snow and the cabin glowed under fairy lights, I realized that sometimes, family isn't the one you're born into. It's the one you rebuild. When the night grew quiet, Thomas and I stood outside, watching the stars shimmer above the frosted pines. Do you ever regret forgiving him? He asked. I shook my head. No, I whispered. Forgiveness was my freedom. He smiled, kissed my forehead and said, You didn't just find love again, Grace. You found yourself. And as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, I knew he was right. Life hadn't given me a second chance. Love had.